Welcome to Gathering Products for Performance Indicators. Today we will take a look at generating products in student strength areas. We'll also take a look at the types of products to use in evaluation and scoring products. So our objectives are to look at what constitutes a strength area in students. We will look at several different types of products that you can use, and then we'll look at some hints for scoring products. So let's start out with strength areas. Performance indicators should document student strength areas. You will be using data from achievement scores. Remember, achievement is not required, but it helps to see where strengths lie in content areas. You will use the traits, aptitudes, and behaviors teacher rating scale to get that teacher input and find out what types of behaviors they see in the classroom. And remember, you can always get other staff members to help complete that tab. So if the student spends time with other staff members and they might see a different trait or behavior, then also get input from any other staff member. You can also get parent input. The notification and consent for referral has a lot of information that parents complete. They can even write a narrative on the back of that page. So be sure to check for any parent input that may have been given. You can also get student input. So you might talk to student peers or the student themselves and get more information about that student. Peers can provide a lot of interesting insight to what they see. And then any additional information to make decisions regarding the collection of performance indicators. So anything that is revealing a strength area about the student. So when you're looking at all of these things, look at what is that data revealing to you. Can you identify the student's areas of strength based on the data that's been collected? These strength areas should help you drive the selection of products that you can have the student complete. So now let's take a look at some product ideas. This will not be an exhaustive list, but it'll serve to get you thinking about appropriate products. So you'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, it says tabs. And this will be on each slide to help you see how the activity that you're completing with the child would relate to the tabs document. So in this case, this activity is going to lend itself to communication skills, problem-solving ability, reasoning, and imagination and creativity. So this activity asks students to design a Rube Goldberg invention. The Primary Education Thinking Skills book on page 108, and then in book 3 on pages 108 through 117 have some spare parts and pictures, and so you can use those in this activity. You would want to show kids what a Rube Goldberg invention looks like. There's a lot of great YouTube videos with student samples that have been done by kids, and they explain their process. So using those two books, you can find some pictures that have these parts that could make up the invention. And then once they have designed their contraption, they could write about it in several different ways. You could have them design a commercial to promote their product. You could have them just do a creative writing piece that somehow incorporates the invention into the writing piece. Or you could even have them create an ad for a magazine where they're trying to sell their invention. A second activity would be to find or draw monster parts and then assign a point value to each of those parts. And you would do that ahead of time. And then invite students to use the parts that they want to use to design a monster that's worth a given amount. and you can adjust the values based on the grade level. And then that would also lend itself to a writing piece about their monster, and you could add in the element of the monster has a flaw, and how does that flaw impact the monster? And so you'll get some humorous ideas from students about those flaws. So these activities would be great for logic and algebraic thinking and reasoning. The balance bender books shows kids that basically the balance of equation, but it uses figures and shapes. And so you could introduce these to students and then have them create some of their own balance benders, see if they've transferred that knowledge. Also, Greg Tang has a great website with sample activities for different grade levels. You will have access to a copy of this presentation, and so you'll be able to click on the links to get to the samples. So there's a link for some samples of Greg Tang's pictorhythms. If you follow him on Twitter, he shares some of these every once in a while for free. But these pictorhythms would work well for mathematical reasoning because the students have to think through and figure out the value of a given image and make sure that it adds up correctly. So you can get some samples at that link. Also, the Venn perplexers, which come from Mindware, are great for problem solving. These are challenging, so you would definitely need to demonstrate how to solve one for kids and then have them complete a few on their own, and then invite them to see if they can create their own Venn perplexer and see if another student can solve it or see if you can solve it to make sure that it makes sense. So again, if you look in the bottom right corner, the tabs correlation would be motivation, problem-solving ability, reasoning, and insight. Especially with the Venn perplexers, if a student is really committed to solving those, that would take a lot of motivation because, like I said, those are challenging. These are a couple more different types of problem solving. So logic puzzles are always a great product to get from students. The Pets Book 2, pages 13 through 25, has an introduction to logic puzzles. So you can introduce it and then have students practice completing some of the puzzles and then see if they can create a simple logic puzzle of their own. Also, pentomino or tangram puzzles are great to use with kids. You could add a time limit for them to solve these problems, and you can vary the level of the puzzle. So you can start out a little bit easier and then get to move to a little more challenging and see how they progress through those. Also, noodlers are a great way to do spatial reasoning. The sticks come with the book, and you have to lay the sticks in a way that separate each of the figures. So you're inviting students to use that logic and reasoning to solve these types of puzzles. And again, for the tabs, this lends itself to motivation if they can stick with the activity to completion, problem solving, reasoning, and insight. So you can also get more writing from students by asking them to look at things from a different point of view, to think of alternatives like what if questions. So presenting students with a question that will prompt a writing piece could get some really good samples. So here's some examples of prompts that you could give students. Should students be required to wear uniforms? What if there was no substitute when your teacher was absent? You are a paper cup that has been thrown into a landfill. What do you do and how do you feel? That comes from page 30 in the active questioning book that you see here. And so you can get a lot of great stories through that. You may have to give students a little bit of background on what a landfill looks and sounds like, and you might can find a video clip to help you show kids information about a landfill. And then they're looking at it from the perspective of the paper cup, so they have to actually take on that persona of the cup and what they would do and how they would feel. And then another one would be, what if you woke up one day and you had become an insect? So what would you do? How would you be feeling? You might also use preference questions as writing prompts. And here's some examples of preference questions. Would you rather have half a year of summer or winter? And I know I would for sure pick summer anytime. Would you rather be a famous athlete or a superhero? Would you rather be fire or water? And for what would you want to be famous? And that last one would be great to get some insight on student interest, because they may focus on an interest area on what they want to be famous for. So that would be, those all would be great ways to get students thinking and writing. Scamper is another great strategy that you could use to generate a great product. You can invite students to take any kind of ordinary object and then you scamper it in as many ways as you can. And Scamper stands for substitute, combine, add, modify, put to another use, eliminate, and rearrange. And obviously you wouldn't want the kids to have to go through all of those. They could just choose maybe 2 or 3 and try those on their object. The Primary Education Thinking Skills book has a great activity that you could use for this on pages 80 through 90. And then you could have students write about their new product that they've come up with after they do the Scamper. So this activity would lend itself on the tabs to communication skills, problem solving ability, inquiry, and imagination and creativity. So that would be a great strategy to use. The Doodle Book series is one that I shared during regional trainings in 2019. These Doodle Books give you part of a picture, so it's like the beginnings of a picture and the student has to finish the picture out. I have linked the Doodle Book series website here along with some sample pages. So if you can't get the book, you can download the sample pages and you might use those. So you can invite students to complete one of the doodles and then follow it up with a writing piece about the image that they ended up creating. And so you can see how there's lots of different ones that lend themselves to boys and girls, and then there's ones that are kind of like science and construction. So lots of different options for using those Doodle Books. So the figure and shape analogies are in the Building Thinking Skills book. I've used the Visual Discrimination book. It's really for more upper level advanced analogies. With the Building Thinking Skills, those were purchased for every LEA. So every LEA has level 1 and level 2. So you can do your practice activities. Of course, one of the activities in there is one we use for 2nd grade Child Find. But you could use any other types of math analogies to work with kids and give them some practice completing the analogies, but then see if they can complete a set on their own or create their own original analogies. There's also a lesson in the PETS Book 3 for analogies on pages 151 to 160, so that would be another great resource. This type of activity would lend itself to problem-solving ability, reasoning, and insight. And then verbal analogies. So same thing, introduce the analogies, give students some practice completing the analogies, and then have them complete a set on their own or create original analogies. And so these are a few books that could be purchased. I have used the Thinking Through Analogies and the Advancing Through Analogies, and then Mindware offers the analogy challenges. So just be sure that you're not only using the multiple choice activities that might be for practice, but give more of an open-ended activity to really see if the students are understanding how to form those relationships. And these activities would lend themselves to problem-solving ability, reasoning, and insight on the tabs. Also, tapping into student interest helps you to understand the child a little more. It helps you build rapport when you're working with that student to generate those products. Um, and it helps the students express what they are interested in. So you could ask students to choose an interest area and write about why they're interested in that topic and possibly something that they've learned from exploring that topic. The student could complete a product in their area of interest and then write about the piece so that you have a product and a piece of writing. For example, they could create an art piece or some type of performance, whether it be in song or poem or dramatic. So have them, produce a product that shows what they're interested in. And then parents may also submit a recording or photos of a performance. It could be in music or sports or acting. It should be clear that these were completed under the direction of someone that's trained in that particular interest area and not just something that, they did with their parents at home. So when you're tapping into interest, that can lend itself to looking at motivation, interest, communication skills, and imagination and creativity when you're completing the tabs. You may also want to incorporate the Talents Unlimited model within getting products from your students. So you may use the productive thinking, forecasting, decision making, and communication talents. All of these lend themselves very well to gathering products. So, starting off with productive thinking, you could get many varied and unusual solutions to a given problem. You could get many varied, unusual ideas for a squiggle. So, we always ask kids to brainstorm a list of things they could turn their squiggle into. So, this would play right into one of those transformation activities. You can also ask students to give the many varied and unusual reasons for a reaction. And you can use images like John Wilhelm's images, the Mysteries of Harris Burdick images, or you can get images from the New York Times, what's going on in this picture. And so again, you will have links to those sites where you can access some of those images for use in your product gathering. The next talents is forecasting. Predict many varied effects if the umbrella had never been invented. Or predict the many varied causes of someone not turning in their homework. I'm sure kids can come up with a wealth of ideas for that one. You might get a lot of humor in some of these ideas that they come up with. For decision making, the students could use this talent when they decide which squiggle idea to create. So after they've generated those many varied, unusual ideas, then they could go through the decision making process to decide which one would be the best idea. You could also have them use decision making to decide on an interest area topic to write on. We know many of the kids that come to us have a variety of interests, and sometimes it's hard for them to narrow down what they want to do. And then lastly, the communication talent, asking kids to use many varied single words to describe an image. And again, you could go back to the images that you were using under productive thinking and get them to generate those many varied single words when they're looking at the images. You can also have students create a network of many varied complete thoughts in the form of math word problems. So can they form and create a word problem that makes sense and has all of the necessary information to be able to solve that problem? So all of these would be great. If you haven't been trained on talents, then you might want to go through some training on the Talents Unlimited model, or just use the language of the many, varied, unusual, and just be sure that you understand each of the talents before just jumping into a product gathering with one of those. Additional ideas for product gathering would be using children's books to prompt writing pieces. I shared several of these at regional training, and so I believe I shared the Not a Box, and I know I shared Turkey Trouble. So Not a Box and Not a Stick are two different books. One is about a box and making it into many varied, unusual things, and the other's doing the same thing with a stick. So you could read that book and then give students a picture of a box, or they could actually have a small box and they turn it into something different than just an ordinary box. Turkey Trouble is one you can use, especially during Thanksgiving, and get students to decide on a disguise for the turkey so that he's not eaten for Thanksgiving. So you could actually have them create the disguise and do a writing piece. You can come in. I paused it. Oh, awesome. Let me put my little mask on. Okay. Thank you. You can just put them right there. We're just all boxed up in here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You can also use books like What Pet to Get or I Want a New Room. Students could write persuasive letters to their parents about the best pet to get or why they want a new room. So you could get a different type of writing that way. Abuela is a great book for looking at things from a different perspective. The granddaughter takes a flight over her city with her grandmother. So you could ask students if they were able to take a bird's eye view of their city, what would they see as they flew around? And then you've got some other books here that would be great for generating some ideas for a follow-up writing piece. You may also use the Jacob's Ladder Effective books that were purchased for each LEA. So you can use the short stories and video clips from those to prompt other writing pieces. Also, there are other activities in the Building Thinking Skills books, and you can use those for the appropriate grade level. They have open-ended activities in the books, which would be the best for products. Use the multiple choice activities to teach prior to having them complete the open-ended products. And then another great resource is this Look Closer book by Nancy Johnson. You can have students show strengths in problem solving, reasoning, creativity, and insight. And so I've put some suggested pages for activities from this book. On page 34 through 35, there's a matching puzzle piece. You could use that for visual discrimination. On page 36 through 39, there's a paper folding activity, and this would be especially good if your system gives the COGAT, because there's that paper folding subtest on the COGAT. So this would be some good practice in to see if they understand it thoroughly. Pages 46 through 50 have students use analytical thinking and visual problem solving with cubes. Pages 62 to 65 are pattern completion. Pages 68 through 69 is visual sequencing and recall with a gridded picture. So there's a picture that's been divided up into grids, and then pieces have been extracted from that picture, and so it's asking students to identify the column and row where that piece of the picture should go. And then pages 80 to 82 are wordless stories. And so students can practice those wordless stories and then maybe create their own wordless story. And then they could even record themselves telling their story and showing their pictures. So those are just some other additional ideas that you could use to gather those products. Some helpful hints if students are having trouble getting started with their writing, you might want to think about providing them a graphic organizer so they can plan out their writing. Sometimes that helps students and makes them feel a little more comfortable with getting their writing down on paper. You also may want to consult with your EL teachers for strategies to assist with gathering products for your EL students and to learn a little bit more about the student. Same thing with special education students. You can work with those special education teachers for best practices and strategies to help students complete those products with success. If you're getting student work samples from the teacher, just ensure that they're above grade level work and not just day-to-day work that the students would be doing. It needs to show that they're thinking above the grade level. Allow students to record themselves telling their story if they have trouble writing their ideas on paper. It could be a Flipgrid video, it could be using dictation features in different pieces of software, just a multitude of different ways that you can get students' ideas without them actually having to write it down. And then for students that have visual impairments, you may request Braille materials from the Alabama School for the Blind. They have adapted the Building Thinking Skills Analogy lessons into Braille, and they can also give you additional ideas for completing products with students that might have a visual impairment. And lastly, we'll take a look at some things to remember when scoring products. So the process for scoring is that you will take the products and use a rubric to score them. The gifted specialist should be the person scoring each of the products. You will attach the rubric that was used to score the product to the product, and then you'll determine if that product should be used. Does it show the student's strength area? Is it the best one out of all of the products collected or one of the best ones? And some additional reminders when you're scoring is to ensure consistency between scores. So taking time at the beginning of the year to make sure everyone's on the same page about scoring the products. Once you've chosen a rubric, use that same rubric for each product of a specific type. So for instance, if your LEA chooses a rubric for writing, only use that one when you score a piece of writing. Additional ideas can be found at this link. It's a collection of ideas that were gathered during the 2019 regional trainings. The title on the document says second grade activities, but these ideas can be used across grade levels. And feel free to add any products that have worked well for your students. The document should still be editable, and you can add something that you think has worked well and share it with others. You can get a copy of this presentation by either scanning the QR code or following the tiny URL link. It will force you to make a copy so that you have your own copy of the presentation and not the master. So, and then you can add or change anything that you need to for that presentation. As always, if you need help from me or have any questions about the presentation, then you can email me and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So thank you for joining me for gathering products for performance indicators. I hope that this has given you some additional ideas to help you when you just need to see if you can get additional products, or especially for your standard referrals that come in, just different ways that you can work with your students to generate the best products to show those strengths. Thank you.